Okay, today's interview sessions are being held at the 7th Regimental Armory in New York City on the occasion of the International Book Fair being held here in New York. And our first interview today is Peter Kraus, who is the owner and operator of Ursus Books. Peter, it's good to have you here, and thank you for participating. I'm just going to ask you some questions, and just feel free to respond in any way you feel comfortable. I think the first thing people would like to know is what's your background, your education, and what got you interested in becoming a bookseller?
I was born in England and educated in England at what was called a public school. Here would be called a private school. And I was fortunate enough to have as a cousin H.P. Kraus. And from an early age, I got his catalogs and would go to auctions with him when he came to England and hear stories about the book trade. And I guess thought, well, this would be great. I'm going to spend my life being paid to read. So I asked to come and work for him, and he made only one condition, that I could either go to university and be whatever I want, or not go to university and come and work for him. So I chose the latter. So I went straight at the age of 18, literally actually, to work for him the day after my birthday, on August 21st, 1963.
In New York City?
I actually went to work in Liechtenstein because he felt that I had to apprentice properly. My first job was as a packer. I still pack very well, and I still pack. And I really worked my way up through the business, which was invaluable. And unfortunately, it's something that people can't really do today because there's so few people that have employees.
Yeah, it's true.
But the ability to work with somebody, and especially to work somewhere like that, was priceless.
And how long were you in Liechtenstein?
Well, on and off, and I worked for HP for 8 years, and I was there on and off in the various stints over time, because I'd go back and do things. But
well, how would you assess the experience of working in a bookstore in Europe versus working in a bookstore in Manhattan?
Well, that's a difficult question. I think the European clientele, I've always felt, was more old-fashioned in the sense of the sort of the Europeans. This is probably true then, maybe less true now. Seem to be interested in what I would call continental books and old-fashioned bibliophily, whereas Americans have always had a passion for literature and the modern first business, which is so huge in America, basically is coming now, I think, in Europe. You see it over there, but it didn't exist when I was working there. And so you had a very sort of old-school approach to the book trade. But my experience, always in Europe, was that that was where we found the books, but we sold them in America. I mean, there are European clients, and I have lots now, but it always was, it tended to be a trade of European books coming to America.
Do you think that had anything to do with the currency, with the different valuations over a period of time?
I never did. I always thought it had to do with the tremendous institutional market that America had, especially when I started out. I mean, the institutional market was so dominant. You had people like Gordon Ray saying, "Oh, God, the collecting era is over. The institutions are buying everything. We can't compete with them," because that's over. But
yeah, pretty much.
But I think that the institutional market was a big influence, and of course, rich Americans tend to outnumber rich Europeans, and that's also changing a little bit.
How do you feel about the phrase that I heard when I first started in the book business? Oh, it's too bad you didn't start 10 or 12 years ago. There were plenty of books then, and now there aren't any.
Well, I mean, that's sort of true. I mean, I was so dismissive of my elders and betters when they made statements like that. But it's clear. I mean, there was the Book Collector published a special issue on Quaritch a few years back, on the centenary. And, there were stories of, trucks arriving with books in the 40s and 50s. And I mean, the day I arrived at Kraus, we unloaded a train, a boxcar.
Wow.
So yes, the books have clearly diminished dramatically and have gone into institutions as much as anything else. On the other hand, the glory of books is books, people are buying and selling books that weren't published when I started.
Yeah,
and it's a changing world. And, I think the one lamentation that I have, it's not about the diminution of the books, it's the disappearance of the bookshops. I think and that you can't argue with. I mean, you look at the ADA directory when I started and now, and it's just a fact of life that the shop is dead. But the books are still there, and I mean, they're not the way they used to be, but there are a lot of books out there.
Maybe just different.
Different books.
But still, there's still material that you can buy out there. When you first started in the trade, Peter, you were approximately 18 or 19 years old. Do you have any fond recollections of your early years, people you may have met or situations that may have occurred that sort of molded you a little bit?
Oh, yeah, and I mean, I could write a book about it. In fact, I probably have to, but because I couldn't have been a successful book, or that sounds arrogant, but I couldn't have been a bookseller without all the help that the older generation gave me. I mean, the people were unbelievable. I mean, even before I started on my own, there was just a real collegial. People like Walter Schatzky or Lucien Goldschmidt. They were so eager to share their knowledge, and I think that was one of the most influential things for me. That it was, I sell a lot of art books. That was part of my business, and I do a lot with art dealers, and I noticed how that's such a competitive business, and I really felt from my beginning days that this is a collegial business, that even though we sort of, and people always say, how do you get on with your competitors? And I said, I've never really felt that competitiveness. I mean, we do, it's much more collegial, and I think that's really always been the joy of the business. I've had close friends, some of my best friends are booksellers. Sure, every now and again you get the competitive situation, but I really don't feel that it's a competitive business. I think the joy of the book trade is that we work together in so many instances, and I've had, such wonderful things happen as a result of that sort of collegial. I mean, not everything is all joy and light, but I mean,
that's true.
I think it's way different from most other professions, and I think people outside the profession don't understand that.
I have similar experiences with people wondering what it is I do and why do I do it. Sometimes it's difficult to explain, but there must have been at least one or two booksellers other than Hans P. Kraus who had a major influence on you as a bookseller. Could you tell us about some of those people and perhaps a little bit about those individuals? Because for posterity, probably most people in this generation aren't aware of some of the people from yours.
Well, I guess one of the first to have a real influence on me was Bill Fletcher, because Keith was very friendly with my eldest cousin, Mary Ann, so I had a sort of introduction to Bill, and Bill took a really paternal interest in me. And one thing about that generation, they took paternal interest without patronizing. I used to buy a lot of books in England and go to Fletcher's, and he would always help me ship them, and I shipped for Bill back here, and Bill would introduce me to people, and I think it's been one of the key things in my life in the book trade is that one person's introduced me to another. I've always felt when people visited me, Europeans would arrive in my shop, I'd always say, where are you going to go? Can I, because without that, you're sort of a blind man without a map. And so Bill Fletcher was great, and it also, the thing about Bill that influenced me tremendously was that wonderful books are not related to their value. I spent days in Bill's shop, and people would come by, and they'd come from the outside, and they'd buy a book for 10 shillings. Or they'd come inside, and Bill would go downstairs and bring up some book for £100,000. And wow. I really believe in that, and the book, you can be excited about a book, you don't pay attention to it. Wonderful books, it's not about the money, and Bill was very influential in, reinforcing that in me. And I actually have an ABA member who shall remain not nameless once asked me for advice in the book trade. And I said, well, you really should have a solid business in modest books, because that you can do every day, and then you don't have to worry if somebody's going to come in and buy a really expensive book. And he said, well, I couldn't go into a place and buy a book for $25. And I said, well, that's really nonsense, and you should really get over that. And he didn't take my advice, but Bill influenced me very much in that sense. And in the same way in which I watched Bill handle the 10-shilling book, you handle the buyer for the 10-shilling book. Everybody has to be treated as if they're, J. Paul Getty. Yeah. And I'm always amused at how people think that's just such a silly thing to say and don't believe that. But people don't come in with their bank balance stenciled on their forehead, and you have to treat everybody. The only thing I require from people is a certain measure of decent manners and decent behavior, and a love for the books. I'm not interested in dealing with investors, and I'm not interested in people who just are boorish, but Bill taught me a lot in that respect. The second great influence on me was Otto Ranchberg, who was another great, he was like a godfather to me, and he'd been a great friend of Hans, and he gave me my first great break in the book trade, because not long after I started, a year after I started, Herbert Reichner died, and Otto was in charge of disposing of the estate, and he persuaded Mrs. Reichner to sell me her antiquarian stock. Because of Otto's influence, she let me buy it and not pay for it until, let me pay for it over time, and took Otto was my bond, and that was a fantastic thing for me. Lathrop bought the rare books, which are actually quite, the quality was high, but the quantity was small, but his antiquarian stock was vast. And that was one of the great sort of events of my life, partly because, not only because it sort of established me, it gave me a great stock, but I was offered the books. I drove up to Stockbridge, and Herbert Reichner was one of those sort of eccentric Looney Tunes in the business that he regarded everybody as incompetent. So he was clearly convinced that he couldn't have anybody go and get a book off the shelf based upon asking them for the author, title, place, and date. So he had all the books wrapped, taped, and numbered, so he could ask for number 37, and that he felt people could deal with. The result for me was that I went to look at 20,000 plus paper parcels.
Oh, God.
So I had the card catalog, but I didn't know that. I was a beginning bookseller. The books didn't resonate with me. So I basically bought the books based on the fact that he had a great name, it seemed a reasonable deal, and I had time to pay for the books. But I opened up one or two packages, and the books were in good condition. But it was a quasi-blind purchase, but it would not have been able to be done with Otto. And Otto was another of those people who were just so... I've been at it now over 40 years, and I've never heard a negative word said about Otto. He was a prince among men, and really marvelous to me. I guess two other people that were incredibly influential were John Zwemmer, who owned Zwemmer's, and he was very encouraging, and because I needed to, I wanted to be an art book dealer in order to actually sort of support myself, because the one thing I'd seen at Kraus was that rare books are tough to make a living from.
That's true.
And I just sold a book that I've had for 20 years, and I didn't regret having it for 20 years, but you have to sort of buy things with that in mind, I think. I never buy a book thinking I'm going to sell it tomorrow. And so the rent was always paid, and the grocery bill paid by the art book business. And John Zwemmer, who had the great art book business in London, was really, I think Bill Fletcher sent me out there with an introduction. In fact, I know he did, and he was very encouraging and helped me and, let me in the basement. And over the years I found that the old style booksellers always had hidden away books, and you needed an introduction to get to those books. And I think some people think this is all a great myth, but it's not a myth. And the ability to get in was always based, usually not on my own charming personality, but on the introduction of somebody else. The last person I would mention in that respect was Lucien Goldschmidt, who was a terrific help, and he would get offered libraries that had art books, and he didn't want to deal with it, so he'd call me up, and we did a lot together like that. And he was the one who got me into Jean. And Jean, there were two great French booksellers, one of whom no longer is around, Jean and Hugues, both of whom had downstairs shops, which were sort of nice, but run of the mill antiquarian, and the great books were always upstairs, and you couldn't get to them without a kind of open sesame based on an introduction. And Lucien provided the open sesame to both of those booksellers.
I liked him a lot.
He was, a marvelous man. And one of my happiest memories of the old days was sitting in the shop one day with Leonard Baskin and Lucien Goldschmidt, and they just, were just talking about things. So between the two of them had great taste, vast erudition, loved to talk, and I was a good listener. And I guess the other great influence on my bookselling career was Leonard Baskin. He named my business Ursus, and he had tremendous taste and was a sort of pioneer collector in many fields, and I was lucky enough to be introduced to him at a very early age, and we became fast friends. And, I learned a lot from him. And that's the other thing, one can learn from one's clients as well as from one's colleagues.
Absolutely.
And it's all about learning. The last thing I'll mention about Otto is Otto in his 80s said one day, the great thing about this business is I'm learning all the time. This is a man in his 80s. And I said to Bill Stoneman last year, I said, the one, I don't know a lot, but the one thing I know for sure is I'm going to die ignorant. Because if you're in this profession, you realize every day you're confronted with this vast amount of information and stuff, and you'll never get a fraction of it. But that's part of the excitement to me, is I see you see things all the time you've never seen before, and you will always keep on seeing things that you will never see before, and that's so exciting.
It's very exciting, and you had the wonderful opportunity to have these great booksellers as friends, colleagues, and partners in a sense. And nowadays I wonder if the same thing can be said of our generation of booksellers.
Well, I don't know. I know partly because of my relationship with HP, but all these people, Lou Cohen at the Arts, they all gave me credit. I could go to these people and they said, Peter, take the book, pay me. And I was really fantastic, because I really didn't start out with any money. I started out with a famous relation. And,
well, that doesn't hurt.
But it was great because it was money in the bank, because people gave me books and were not worried about when they were going to pay. They said, don't
sweat it.
Don't sweat it. And it was, and HP the same. He was a fantastic support to me. I couldn't have done it without him, and he also gave me, was unbelievably helpful. And you need that. Nobody can do anything on their own.
You have to. Well, Peter, the generation that you and I grew up in, I'm a 50s plus bookseller, you're a 60s plus bookseller. How do you translate your business into this modern world with the internet? Are you have a presence? Do you have a web page? Are you involved in the internet?
Oh, absolutely, totally. It sort of, when the internet started, it destroyed my art book business temporarily, because my business was based on the idea that I have the books, because that's one of the first lessons John Zwemmer taught me. He said, listen, somebody has a Rembrandt, they need the book that Rembrandt is in, and they want it now, and they don't care what the price is. And I based my business on that model of having the book, so that when anybody, and I think people all over the world in the art world knew that I was one of the 2 or 3 people, if you needed a book, I had it. It wasn't cheap, but I had it. That model was destroyed by the internet, so I've reinvented the art book business by specializing in the 20th century, and that's working. The rare book business is a different issue. I have a website. I don't have everything on the website, because I don't believe that my clients want, I like to have a little bit of sort of mystery to my stock. Sure. I'm trying desperately, my goal is to have books that are not on the internet, in the sense that, I used to sell, one of the books I used to love to sell by the Edith Wharton Decoration of Houses. Now there are 27 copies online. They probably all look horrible, but I don't want to have a book that's out there where somebody can say to me, oh, it's online for X, because it's, and you can't, obviously that's a crass generalization, but it's my goal is I really want to deal in things that are not that common. It poses a slight difficulty because it's easier to sell books that everybody knows, and those books that everybody knows tend to be the ones that tend to be online. But I'm old enough that this is my passion. This is what I do to keep myself happy every day, and I'm, you know, it's a way of life. It's not a way of making a living at this point, and I'm lucky in that respect. So I can do it. It's probably not the most brilliant business model, but it's what I want to do to keep me going. But I'm continually amazed at how, you know, one used to sell books when the internet started. You sell a $10 book. I sold a $50,000 book on the internet this year to somebody online in Europe, and I sold also to a local person on ABE, and that was from my website, a $25,000 book. So that surprises me that people would do that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a reflection of that. I mean, I have a certain reputation, and people believe that. But I think
that had
that's
a lot
the
to do with
future.
it.
I think it's the future. I think people, our children's generation, these are people who look online, they use the internet. And the biggest mistake, I made two tremendous mistakes when the internet started, and this was against advice of people who were smarter than me, which is a lot of people, but I had a shop, and I thought, okay, well, people need to see the books. And I realize now that the catch-22 of that is, and it's true at book fairs and in the shop, that people do need to see the books, but they don't need to buy your books when they see them.
That's right.
And I sold a book after the San Francisco Book Fair to somebody who saw somebody else's copy at the book fair, went home, looked it up online, mine was cheaper, mine was better, and they bought mine. Now, I'm sorry for the other dealer who lugged the book from Europe to San Francisco, but that happens to me all the time. And in my shop, that happened in art books to a tremendous degree, of people coming in, writing down the title and going off. And of course they do it at book fairs. And when I mentioned that to my friend Martin Olive in Brussels in December, I said, people come into my shop and they write books down. He said, my clients are much more sophisticated than yours. They come into my shop and they take out their telephones and they photograph the books. So that's an issue, but I think you just have to, move on and not be, troubled by it. But it's definitely a huge change in the way things work. And if you ignore it at your peril.
Did you have much of a problem transitioning from being a non-internet bookseller to an internet bookseller? Did you have problems personally? I mean, at first I had a lot of difficulty understanding how the whole thing worked.
Not really, only in the sense of irritate. It's the one problem I've had with the internet is the fact that 10,000 people are selling books on the internet, of which like 9,900 haven't got a clue what a book is.
That's true.
And the client, it is my mantra for the internet is really the blind leading the blind. And right at the very beginning, one of the very first internet experiences I had, I saw a book online. It was right when the internet started. It was a 16th century book on the Philippines. I can't remember the exact title, but it was on the Philippines, and I didn't even see it. A client of mine in Spain called me up and said, I found this book on the internet. It's in California. I can't deal from Spain to California. Could you please get it for me and just deal with it? I did. I called up I tracked this person down. They were a teacher. They weren't, it was quite hard to actually get hold of them. She agreed. I said, I must get the book on approval. I'm not going to. It was $10,000. It was $6,000, I think. Anyway, I managed. And first, I said, the woman is in California. I said, well, I know 90% of the book trade in California, so you can call anybody up and get a reference from me. But she didn't know anybody in the book trade in California, so that was a no. So I ended up sending her a check, and I said, I'll send you a check. Send me the book, and if I don't like the book. So she agreed to that. So I sent the book. The book came, and it was black. The pages were they weren't brown, they were black. It was almost as if it was printed on black paper.
It was like smoke stained or something?
No, I think it was a book printed in the Far East, 400 years ago. It probably lived out there, and it was a wreck. It was completely a wreck. So I called up the lady, and she was quite huffy and said, you clearly don't understand. This book is 400 years old, and So, but I sent it back. But I thought, she left that conversation thinking that I'm the complete nitwit. And I left the conversation knowing she was. But the thing is, she was going to sell that book because I'm sure it went back online and she'd probably sell it to somebody who didn't know anything. And that's it. The people, in the old days when you went to a Lathrop Harper or an Argosy or a Kraus or whoever, you were dealing with people who knew something. And clearly, there are still people out there who know something, but there's the ability of ignorant people to sell books has now been made so easy by the internet, so that you have this. I am convinced right now that, and nothing will dissuade me from this, that there are vast amounts of books being traded that are incomplete, that are bibliographically wrong, where the dust jackets have been switched, where the dust jackets are fakes, where the signatures, when I started in the business, there was a joke about Corot that he painted, 3,000 paintings, of which 10,000 were in America. And I think that you probably have that true of, Hemingway inscribed 50 books, of which, 3,000 are America. It's the same thing. And nothing will persuade me that that is not true, and that I'm sure the internet will propagate this incredible ability for people to sell wrong books.
Mm. In the few minutes that we have remaining, could you sort of the question I've often asked is, if you were to start in the book business today,
right,
how would you do it? Or would you do it?
Well, I would. I think there's tremendous as long as you understand that it's not a way to make a lot of money. I don't think anybody I think it's all about the passion, and you can have a great standard of living, but if you're thinking about money, definitely don't think about the book trade. But if you want to have a great time and if you love books, it's still. And what I've always told people, whether they collect or deal, find something that you're passionate about. Learn about it. Learn before you leave. Learn about something and then get into it. And do an area where there aren't just $100,000 books. Start with something that's affordable. And make friends with people in the trade who collect, or librarians, so learn, because take advantage of the knowledge that's there. But do it. Don't think you can become a specialist in Elizabethan literature, because you couldn't even do that 50 years ago, but there's tons of stuff out there, and you just have to have the passion and the curiosity and the humility to know that you don't know it all. Some people don't quite understand how complicated it is, and people do. That's the reverse of it. Is I think the internet has made a lot of people think, I can be a book dealer. Well, God bless you, you can't. It's really difficult, and don't think you know it all, because you don't. You can't.
In the moment or two we have left, could you sort of look into your crystal ball and tell me what you think, what's going to happen to our business as time goes on? Are we going to have a book business 50 years from now, 100 years from now, or is this going to dissipate somehow?
No, I think we will. I sense that we will have this continuing sort of commodification where the famous great things will become, the Principia and the Shakespeare Folio, the Darwin's Origin. These icons will get more valuable because we've got this sort of global market which our forefathers never had. You can sell to almost any corner of the earth. And, you have this vast amount of books, the books that are being published as we speak, that will become, it is a self-perpetuating phenomenon. I think you'll have a slow but steady institutional disgorgement, because clearly, especially in America, there are libraries sitting on collections that they have A, no use for, and B, shouldn't have had, because of the tax element in America where people could give things to places.
And still do.
You have institutions that have no business having things that they have. So I think that will slowly change, because it will either be a question of selling or shutting, or both. And I would like to think that the tulip mania of, hobbits at $50,000 and so on will burst, because I find that sort of deeply disturbing, but that's old-fashioned sense. The fact that, first edition of Tartuffe, which I have, is $30,000, and that doesn't get you any decent modern first today.
No.
And this is a book that Tartuffe you don't see but once every decade. So there is a strange imbalance in price today, just the way there is in the art market, and that may or may not change. But I would like to think it will change because, you know, I think that the Tolkiens and Rowlings of today are the Arnold Bennetts and Galsworthy of yesterday. But,
Yeah.
you know, that may not change because there might be such intense, you know, perpetual demand that it will preserve it, but I doubt it.
I tend to agree. Peter, thank you so much for participating, and I've enjoyed this immensely, and I hope those who view your interview will enjoy it as much as we did. Thank you so much.
I always like to talk about books.
Nothing better. Nothing